everyone. We are from Group 4. Today, we will be presenting Chapter 10, Managing Independent Work, Recitations and Discussions. This presentation is specially prepared for Madam Lina Murshida Hamzah, our lecturer. But not to forget, it is also for you guys who are special and beloved to us. Now, without further ado, let's start! Guys, wait a minute. Before we go to the content, let's see list of the contents first. The first content is independent work. The second content is recitations. The third content is discussions. And the fourth or the last content is recitation versus discussion. Now we have know the list of content. Let's proceed to the first content. Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. You can call me Zanisa and I am your first presenter. Now let's proceed to the first content, which is independent work. So, what is the meaning of independent work? Have you ever listened the term independent work before? I think you may have listened this term before. But let me explain more about the definition of independent work. The definition of independent work is the ability to work self-sufficiently on assigned tasks, or in other words, working on something by themselves. In school, independent work is a self-guided process wherein the learning works is to expand students' knowledge and skills. In school, independent work is type of educational activity carried out by students without direct contact with the teachers. So the goal of independent work in school is to shift the learning process to the students, making them an active participants with the teachers. Next, let's continue with teachers' point of view. Teacher's point of view has 2 points, which is from positive side and from negative side. So from positive side, we have opportunities. Some teachers view independent work as an opportunity to differentiate instruction and pull individuals or small group, while the other students are working on independent activities. From negative side, teachers' view is negative connotation. Some teachers view the term independent work with negative connotation, such as bored, passive student doing repetitive, and tedious worksheets. Now we have arrived to the last part that I will explain, which is designing and implementing effective independent work. In designing and implementing effective independent work, we have 6 steps, which is the first step, design tasks. The second step, explain tasks. The third step, ensure suitable tasks. The fourth step, observe students. The fifth step, prepare extra activities. And the last step, which is the 6th step, is ways to look for help. Now, let's go further for every step. Alright, let's see the first step in implementing and designing effective independent works, which is design tasks. In design tasks, it means that select and create tasks. So, selecting and creating tasks is the first challenge for teachers, since the purpose of tasks is to promote students' academic achievement, yet can be done independently. The second step is explain tasks. In explain tasks, teachers need to explain why they are doing this assignment before letting students go off on their own. So in explanation, teachers need to describe any strategies that need to be used and also do some examples. This is to be used for students as their guidelines. The third step is ensure suitable tasks. By meaning ensure suitable tasks is ensure that tasks are well matched to student achievement levels. So to ensure suitable tasks, teacher needs to design tasks to be open-ended so students of all levels can complete their assignments. To ensure suitable tasks, breaking bigger tasks into more manageable parts can also help students that are on different levels. So in other words, every student can do it little by little and it is suitable task for them to do. The fourth step is observe students. So in observe students, teachers need to keeping track of what the rest of the class is doing when working with one student or with a small group of students. So this is a challenge for a teachers because in observed student, behavior and understanding needs to be monitored. Therefore, when observed student, it is recommended to spend the first 5 minutes of independent work time on checking students' progress so that teachers can make sure all students can keep up or understand what they are doing. The fifth step is prepare extra activities. Why prepare extra activities is one of the steps in implementing and designing effective independent work? Well, this is because every student has different level of achievement. So, every student pace are different. Therefore, teachers must accommodate the varying pace which students work. By meaning extra activities, teachers can provide educational one, but enjoyable activity for students that have finished their task before others. Okay, the last point in implementing and designing effective independent work is ways to look for help. Under ways to look for help, teachers must teach students how they can obtain help and when to look for help. So, teachers have to establish procedure for asking. For example, put up a small red flag on the desk. By put up a red flag on the desk, teachers can see which students are finding for help or which students need help. Under ways to look for help, peer assistance should be encouraged as well. This is because peers maybe have the same point of view of what student cannot solve or what student need in help. So the problem of the student can be easily solved. Okay, now that is all from me. I pass to the next presenter.
Now, we will take a look at the tips for independent work. First and foremost, teachers should assign work that is meaningful, useful, and relevant to the students. Often, our teachers create their own assignments rather than relying on commercially prepared materials. In this way, they better are able to conduct these tasks with students' backgrounds and experiences, target particular problems that students are having, as well as provide increased individualization. For instance, when teacher Watika wants her students to become familiar with the library resources, she can ask them to do tasks such as find 2 facts on a topic that interests the students by using 3 different search engines to confirm the facts. This simple way to individualize the assignment has a very positive impact on students' motivation, as well as there is an added bonus where students have to work on their own. Apart from that, teachers should also match the assignments to students' varying achievement level. For some students, reading assignments seems too easy. They can finish the reading quickly and fill their time by doodling, looking out the window, as well as gossiping. While others may seem to find the reading is more difficult and need a few more additional minutes to complete reading the assignment. Similarly, when writing one paragraph in 10 minutes, it does not seem like a particularly challenging assignment for most of the students. However, there are some students find it is very difficult to write one paragraph in 10 minutes. Therefore, one of the strategies is to use open-ended tasks that allow students working on a variety of levels to complete the work successfully. For instance, teacher Fatima asked the students some questions at the end of the chapter after students have completed reading the chapter in the textbook, instead of asking students to create their own questions and then answer them. The question can be broad enough so that almost everyone in the classroom is able to respond, although the answer obviously vary in terms of length, substance, and coherence. Other than that, teacher can make sure that written and oral directions are clear. At the beginning of the lesson, teacher should briefly introduce the assignment, which only takes just a few minutes, explaining what students are going to do, how much time they will have, and what they will expected to do once they have finished. Sometimes teachers think that they do not have to explain orally what students are going to do because some instructions are already in the textbook or on the worksheet. However, do not assume that they will read the instructions automatically, and hence still the teacher must explain the instruction briefly. Fourth is monitor students' behavior and comprehension. Student behavior monitoring occurs when an adult regularly checks on students' behavior over a period of time. Teacher can circulate throughout the room while students are working in order to monitor the behavior of students doing the assignment. The purpose of circulating is not simply to monitor behavior. Roving around the room allows the teacher to monitor students' understanding of the assignment. Clearly, it is not enough for students to remain busy doing the task, but they also must understand what they are supposed to do and also carry out their task successfully. On the other hand, teachers should also plan for ragged endings. Ragged endings here means the students finish their work at different pace. Ragged endings can upset a schedule that looks beautiful on the paper. Students who cannot complete their assignment in the allotted time might have to do them for homework. Meanwhile, for students who complete their work earlier than the teacher expected, need something to keep them occupied. If they must sit and wait with nothing to do, they might disturb other members who are still working on the assignments. Therefore, for students who finish a task earlier, the teacher can give instruction what they are going to do next. Finally, teachers should teach students the norm for assisting peers. In some classes, teachers encourage students to work collaboratively. Meanwhile, in other classes, giving or receiving help is equivalent to the cheating. This situation can present a real dilemma for students. On one hand, they need to follow teachers' instruction and stay out of trouble, but on the other hand, they need to complete the assignment successfully and to assist their friends who are having difficulty. Therefore, it is important to note that all teachers should work hard on explaining what helping really means and also stress on the futility of copying. For instance, teacher can assign different problems to students who sit next to each other while allowing them to help each other without copying. Now we will proceed to the advantages of independent work. There are 3 advantages that I will explain later, which are students work more effectively, students can enjoy the challenge, and students are having less conflict. First and foremost, the benefit of independent work is students work more effectively. When students work independently, they will be more likely to enhance their efficiency. This is because there is nobody to slow them down in order to complete the task, and also there is no other opinions that are contra with their opinions. With fewer interruptions, it will be easier for them to focus, work much faster, know exactly what is going on, and they will have more clarity on the project that they are working on. Meanwhile, working with others can take a toll on students' productiveness, especially when chatting and gossip interferes. In addition, off-topic conversations, unnecessary arguments, and different opinions will only hinder their performance. However, by blocking out all the distractions and working solo, more energy and soul can be put into their project, which resulting in enhanced efficiency and improve their productivity for better outcome. Apart from that, students can also enjoy the challenge. Sometimes, by working alone can be an enjoyable challenge. Having no one else to rely on can be a great test in the classroom as students work up on their own ideas and put themselves in charge. Working individually can increase students' independence and become more creative. Many solo workers learn to make their own decisions, perform duties alone, and find their own spark of inspiration. When there is only yourself to rely on, you will realize that your motivations, self-awareness, and discipline increases. For instance, students will make sure to stick with the deadline, challenge their own ideas and creativity, as well as agree to take full responsibility for a task. After all, independency is a great skill to add in your CV. Lastly, there is less conflict occur by working independently. Working in a team can be quite challenging, especially when there are many team members to please. Everyone wants to put their 2 cents in and reinforce their ideas on the project. One might eager to impress the teacher and try to take over all the work, while another might sit and do nothing. With so many different people exchanging ideas, there is more likely going to be a conflict of opinion when working with several people. However, by working alone, it can prevent from all the aggravation that might come with working in a team. Students can make their own decisions and there is nobody to tell them otherwise. In addition, there is no need to worry about the competitive or lazy co-workers, and there is more room for the students to concentrate and enjoy a smoother workflow. Next is disadvantages of independent work. Today, we will discuss 3 disadvantages in independent work, which are students become more stressful, get bored, and less creativity. Firstly, students become more stressful. As we discussed in the benefit of independent work, I have mentioned that by working independently, students have more freedom and increased efficiency. But this will cause students to become more stressful. Operating alone means taking all the work by yourself. Students cannot delegate different tasks to other team members, and they have to make sure that every responsibility is fulfilled by the time the deadline arrives. If they are running late on the job, there is no one else to turn to, and rushing to avoid delays can certainly boost their stress levels. Less help also equates to more stress. When student works alone, they only have themselves to rely on. They must solve the problems by themselves and finish difficult tasks on their own. But being part of a team offers you support and advice from others, which ultimately speeds things up and diminishes anxiety in the classroom. Apart from that, independent work will make students easily get bored. A major benefit of working in a team is the opportunity to socialize and enjoy the work. Team laughter, support, and encouragement can go a long way in the classroom. It builds motivation and an overall happier working environment. However, working alone can strip you of these benefits. You will likely get bored and lonely over time no matter how busy your workflow is. There is no one to talk to, nobody to share ideas with, and discuss your concerns with. If you are one of those who thrives off interacting with others, and enjoys a high-energy workplace, then working independently is not for you. It can get quiet and lonesome and incredibly monotonous. Lastly is independent work will make students less creative. Working alone pushes students to find their own creativity, which is probably not as beneficial than working in a team. Students might suffer from mental block and have a constrained ideas which leaving them in a humdrum. On the other hand, teamwork lets students to share their ideas and hear other opinions. Brainstorming together and hearing different perspectives allows for inspiration and resourcefulness. Going solo on a project also means less skill count. No matter how qualified or experienced a person is, chances are they do not have all the skills necessary for a job is high. Therefore, group work enables students with different abilities and qualities to contribute in an effective and more unique results. Now that we have finished covering independent works part, we will proceed to the recitation method. Much of the talk that occurs between teachers and students is unlike the talk in the real world. Let's consider an example. In the real world, if you ask someone the name of a particular author, we can assume that you really need to know the information and will be grateful for a reply. The conversation would probably goes like this. If you ask questions to your best friends, such as, "Who wrote The Grapes of Wrath?" And then your best friend will reply, John Steinbeck. And then of course, you will thank her. "Oh yes, thank you." In contrast, if a teacher asks this question during a lesson, the dialogue generally sounds like this. "So who wrote The Grapes of Wrath?" And then a student will reply, "John Steinbeck." And then of course the teacher will reply, "Very good," to the students. Here, the question is not a request for needed information, but a way to find out what students know. The interaction is more like a quiz show than a true conversation, according to Robbie in 1988. The teacher initiates the interaction by asking a question, a student will respond, and the teacher will evaluate the response or follow-up in some way. This pattern of interaction, which is IRE, which I represents teacher initiates, R refer to student's response, and E refer to the teacher evaluate, is called as recitation. It is often emphasized the recall of factual information and demand a little higher level of thinking skill. There are 4 characteristics of recitation. First and foremost, the teacher is the predominant speaker. What is predominant speaker? Predominant speaker is being most frequent to talk. For instance, in recitation, the teacher speaks 2/3 or most of the time during the lesson. Secondly, typical exchange in recitation is that the teacher asks questions, students respond to the question, and teacher evaluate the response, or we call it as IRE. Thirdly, the primary aims of this method of instruction is to check students' comprehension. And lastly, the pace of recitation is very quick pace and fast exchanges.
The first challenge of recitation is unequal participation among students. Imagine ourselves in front of a class of 25 students. We just ask a question, a few individuals has their hands up conveying their desire or at least their willingness to be called on. Others are sitting quietly staring into space, their expression blank. Still, others are slumped down as far as possible in their posture clearly say, "Don't call me teacher." We as a teacher tempting to call on individuals whose hand is raised, right? But selecting only those who volunteer or those who call out could limit the interaction to a handful of students. This can be a problem. Students tend to learn more if they are actively participating. Furthermore, because those who volunteer are often high achiever, calling only volunteer is likely to give us distorted picture of how well everyone understands. To overcome this issue, teachers should distribute participation widely by specifying that each student should give only one possible answer to the problem. For example, what is prime number, Shamila? Okay, next, Haika, what is your answer? And by not grabbing the first answer and moving on to a new question, teacher passes from Shamila to Haika and then to Nadim. Other than that, teacher also can use round-robin technique by going around the group and calling on each student in order, or can also use a pattern that is more stumble so that students do not know exactly when they will be called on. Another strategy is to use the popsicle stick system by pulling stick label with a student name from a can. A second challenge of recitation is balancing the need to maintain pace and involvement with the need to provide feedback and time to think. When we ask a question to our student, we already have our answer in our mind, right? But not for students. So, as a teacher, we need to give our students at least 3 to 5 seconds for them to think and give possible answer to us and tell the student that we don't expect an immediate answer. There is no point asking a well-formulated higher level question if you don't allow sufficient wait time. Other than that, we sometimes give a question that might be easy for us but very hard for students to answer it. So, in order to maintain the pace and momentum of the lesson, teacher need to give an appropriate feedback. For example, when students provide an incorrect answer, we can make a simple correction and move on, or decide that the student can arrive at the correct answer with a little help by providing hint or prompt. Next, the student which given confident correct answer, we can simply ask another question or provide a brief verbal or non-verbal indication that they are correct, such as angguk-angguk or smile. But if the student hesitate to answer, even though they know the correct answer, we can explain why answer is correct by telling, yes, that's correct, Hakim, because to reinforce the material. Another tip of implementing effective recitation is stimulate and maintain interest by inject mystery and suspense element when teaching, such as before we proceed to the next lesson, you need to be more focused because this lesson will be asking in the final exam, or this chapter is more tricky than our previous chapter, so that students will be focused in the class and the recitation method can run smoothly. Teacher also can inject humor and novelty when asking a question or challenge students to think creatively before answer the question. Next is support the participation of diverse learners by not picking same student, just like I mentioned before. Because students might know the answer, but they just too shy to stand out in front of the class to avoid doing mistake. Because there is a case that girls learn that sounding too sure of themselves will make them unpopular. Last but not least, monitor comprehension by use a steering group of example, observe the performance of sample of students, including the low achiever, to know when to move on. Now, let's move on to the advantages of recitation method. Firstly, the recitation method can improve student focus and memory. In order to answer teacher question, students need to really focus in the class and understand the topic clearly. Next is recitation also promote listening skill. Students need to use their listening skill to maximum level in order to maintain focus in the class. Other than that, with confidence in students, just like what we had learned before, students who answer the question normally brave enough to give an answer because that requires student knowledge about that particular topic, and most importantly, they need to speak in front of the whole class. Lastly, to provide opportunity to go over a material that students are not fully understand. When do a recitation method, teacher can see actually some students might left behind during the teaching process because when teacher asks the question, that particular student cannot answer it correctly. Recitation also has its own disadvantages such as self-discipline. If a student do not have a good discipline and keep distracted by other things during the class, recitation method is hard for them. Next is time-consuming. Need time to wait for student answer and to find correct or suitable answer from student. And last but not least, also bring anxiety or pressure. It can be stressful for some students that are left behind, such as slow learner students. Discussion is a form of verbal interaction in which individuals work together to consider an issue or a question. The discussion is intended to stimulate a variety of response to encourage students to consider different points of view, to foster problem solving, to examine implication, and to relate material to students' own personal experience. In a discussion, individuals might offer their understanding, relevant facts, suggestion, opinion, perspective, and experience. These are examined for their usefulness in answering the question or resolving the issue. A discussion can be an opportunity for some kids to show how smart they are and to get some airtime. In discussion, the majority of the questions are critical thought questions, and the response time is longer. Teachers essentially stay out of the interaction except for making sure that students have an opportunity to speak when the interaction gets excited. In contrast to the recitation, students speak directly to one another, they comment on one another's contribution, they question, they disagree, and they explain. Teachers also need to ask for supporting evidence when students giving their point of view. But providing opportunities for discussion means that teachers have to give up their roles as a leader and assume the role of facilitator. This can be difficult for teachers who are accustomed to dominating or at least directing this conversation. Now we have characteristics of discussion. We have 6 characteristics. Number 1, ensure maximum participation by the student. Number 2 is students have the opportunity to critique and evaluate. Third is students should anchor the discussion themselves. Next, logical and meaningful criticism should be accepted. Number 5, keeping teacher as a guide. And last but not least, teachers select the topics only with the help of students.
The discussion delivers several purposes. First and foremost, discussion helps students to stimulate a variety of responses. This happens because every student has a different point of view, since they come from a different backgrounds, have different experiences, and have different ways of thinking. Secondly, students will be encouraged to consider a different point of view. They will realize that everyone is entitled to their point of view, but to achieve one objective, they need to discuss among them which solution is the best. Thirdly, discussion fosters students' problem solving and critical thinking skills. There is a saying that says 2 or more heads are better than 1, meaning that students can solve more complex problems when they solve them together. Lastly, discussion helps students to examine the implications of a discussion and relate the material to their own experiences. In order to implement effective discussion, several things need to be considered before the activity took place. First, it is wise to limit the size of the group, since it is hard to discuss in a large group of students because discussion aims and topic can be easily distracted. Also, only some students will actively participate in the discussion and few others will be passive. The second strategy to implement effective discussion, teachers has to arrange students' table so they can make eye contact while discussing with their group member. Eye contact is one of the non-verbal communication that helps students to understand more about the issues discussed, since eye contact increases students' focus. Thirdly, teachers need to establish a structure that allows all students to participate in a discussion. The teachers need to create an atmosphere that encourages participation. For example, teachers choose topics and platforms that excite the students. Lastly, teachers were required to prepare students for participating in a student-centered discussion by explicitly teaching the prerequisite skills like talking to each other, don't monopolize, asking others what they think and their opinion, and acknowledging others' ideas. Sometimes, when having a discussion, there will be a moment of silence where no one doesn't have any idea what to say and how to continue the discussion session. Well, these are the questions that can be used by teachers for maintaining momentum in class discussion. First, question that asks for evidence, like how do we know that? What data is that claim based on? Where did you find that view expressed in the text? Second, question that asks for clarification. For example, what do you mean by that? Can you put that another way? And can you explain the term you just used? Third, linking or extension question. For instance, how does your observation relate to what the group decided last week? And is there any connection between what you have just said and what Aiman was saying a moment ago? Fourth, hypothetical question, like what might have happened if Aiman had not missed the school bus? Fifth, cause and effect questions. For example, how might the rumor affect the school play? And how does a good discussion affect students' thinking? Lastly, summary and synthesis question. For instance, what keyword or concept best captures our discussion today? And what remain unresolved or contentious about this topic? The discussion method offers many advantages that potentially improve our education method and our teaching and learning process. One of the advantages is it can improve students' communication skills. Students were put in a situation where they were forced to speak up their opinion while discussing with their friends. This situation will escape students from their comfort zone, and over time, they will become comfortable and excited sharing their opinion. Next, a discussion will increase students' engagement. When having traditional teaching and learning process, we noticed that sometimes students were easily lost their focus and interest. In the worst case scenario, we can see many students were sleeping during the teaching and learning process. A discussion will boost students' morale and engagement since they were actively involved in the teaching and learning experience. Moreover, a discussion was able to empower students' critical thinking skills. This situation can occur because students were required to brainstorm among their groups to find the solution or effect on the topics or issue discussed. In addition, they can expand their thinking skills since they can see the topics discussed from other perspectives. As the last point, students will become open-minded and tolerant of others' opinions. Despite all the advantages mentioned, there are also a few disadvantages that can be found when conducting discussions method in the teaching and learning process. The first disadvantage of discussion method is time-consuming. The process of exploring a subject while keeping students on task in the discussions requires far more time than classic lecture-style instruction. Short class periods may not be sufficient to accommodate a complicated subject matter or to fully explore discussion topics. The second disadvantage is only a few students will dominate the discussions. The students with more confidence and knowledge on subject matters will speak more than other group members, and these passive students will become more afraid to share their opinion. Lastly, it will become hard for a teacher to control class activity. The teacher cannot observe and guide all students at the same time because a teacher can only focus on a few groups at a particular time.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. Today I am going to present about recitation versus discussions. As you guys have know, the explanation from previous presenters, we can identify several differences between recitation and discussions. And we can also set two different roles from these two methods, which are teachers and students' roles. Okay. For the first section, which is teacher roles for recitation versus discussion, you can expand to four elements in differentiating between recitation and discussion. For the first element is about inquisitor. What it means by inquisitor? Inquisitor means someone who asks series of difficult questions. In element inquisitor, for recitation, teacher asks most of the question, but for discussion, teacher asks few questions. For the second element is about interaction. Interaction means the communication between two people, right? In recitation, Teacher facilitates or decides who respond to questions. He or she will select students who are going to answer his or her questions. While for discussions, teacher encourage students to interact among themselves. For the third element is about respondent. In recitation, teacher usually does at least half of the talking, while for discussion, teacher try to remain silent while students engage among themselves. For the final element, which is evaluative, during recitation, teacher provide feedback on students' immediate response through verbal or non-verbal approaches, while in discussion, teacher exploits only the best opportunities to give feedback on interaction or interpretational issues. In the next section, I am going to talk about students' roles. For student roles in recitation versus discussion, there are also 4 elements that we can identify in differentiating between these two methods, which are also inquisitor, interaction, respondent, and evaluator. For inquisitor in recitations, students ask a few questions. Meanwhile, in discussion, students are going to ask a lot of questions. For next element, we have interaction, where in recitations, students are called by their teacher to participate and to maintain the topic coherence, while for discussions, students are encouraged to each other to participate among themselves. For the third element is about respondent, where in recitations, students respond to the teacher's questions, while for discussions, students reply to each other's questions. The final element is about evaluator. In recitation, students' responses are evaluated by the teacher, while for discussion, students try to challenge each other's ideas by responding whether they are agree or disagree and explaining the reasons to it. In conclusion, generally what we have learned from this topic are about the approaches that we can take in managing our class as a future teacher, which are independent work, recitation, and discussion. These approaches are important so that we can have diversity methods to carry on our lesson throughout different students' preferences in our way of teaching. Independent work focuses on the situation in which the work is assigned to the entire class, while the teacher circulates and assists students in completing the task. Both recitation and discussion need to be managed thoughtfully by teachers who are aware of students' pitfall and potential.